Hello and welcome to this video on Introduction to Python using the Spyder IDE. In this workshop, we're going to talk about what is Python and Spyder IDE, where to download Python and Spyder using the Anaconda distribution, a little bit about the Spyder IDE environment, how to edit and recode data, run different statistical tests, and create some basic visualizations. In video one, we're going to specifically talk about an overview of the scenario. We'll talk about what is Python and Spyder, where to download Python and Spyder, what is a module and how to install them, an overview of the Spyder environment, foundations of the Python language, and how to create objects. First thing you want to do is we want to download the Anaconda distribution, and that allows us to get Python and a bunch of other nice things that are installed with it. To do that, you're going to go to Downloads, and then you're going to go ahead and put in your information for an email address and submit. And then you'll be able to get a link for this. From there, we can also go ahead and, let's see. Once you get that link, you can then go ahead and download it. Okay, I just received the email from Anaconda Distribution Download. And if we scroll down, we can click on the download now. And then we can download for the specific type of OS we're using. Download takes a little bit of time, so I'm not going to go through that process. But once you're done, go ahead and close out of these. If I go to the Start menu, oops. There we go. We can either click on the specific one we want to use, like Spyder. We can also click on the Anaconda Navigator. Once we click on that, it has different options within this as well. And we'll give that a second to go ahead and launch. While that's loading, Python is an easy to learn language. It's a really powerful programming language as well. So it can do a whole lot of things, like you could do create websites, interactive dashboards, visuals, machine learning, deep learning. It's just a fantastic language. So it is really efficient, high-level data structures. It is a simple but effective approach to object-oriented programming, and it's used for readability and productivity. Lots of companies use Python. It's a really great skill to have. Information on how to install Python on your own computer is provided at the end of the handout that we have that corresponds with this. And it has everything we'll be covering today. And at the bottom, there's information specific about Python, where to install. So if you're using command line, how to install that using pip commands. If you're using Gouda, you can use that as well. There's also Canopy, a bunch of different variations of the distributions. If you're getting started, just use Anaconda. It's a great option. You can also use Jupyter Notebook. We'll be covering that in a separate video. But for now, we'll go ahead and use the Spyder IDE. And there's various different IDEs, so really pick what you prefer. The nice thing is Python is free, and it's a really powerful language. Most current latest version we'll be using is 3.12. We'll be using the 3 series, because 2 series was sunsetted a couple years back. So now that this is all set, we can go ahead. I'm going to close out of these parts. We have different options. So there is the PyCharm. That's another great IDE that you can use. There's Jupyter Notebook. There's RStudio that comes batched in there too. And then there's Spyder. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Spyder here. And we'll give that a second. I can minimize this now. And while that's loading, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the scenario. So in the scenario, we're going to be interested in studying the relationship between the amount of corruption in a country and the quality of their economy. For this question, we are lucky as data already exists. We'll be using the World Development Indicators, which is compiled annually by the World Bank. We'll be using the dataset from a prior year, and we have simplified the dataset, but you can find the full dataset on World Bank's website. We're also lucky because World Bank saves the data in a way that makes it easy to open. Often, when you find datasets, for example, old census data, it can take a lot of effort to transform the data into a usable format. And of course, there's never a guarantee that someone else has created the data set that you specifically want to work with in advance. So often the first step in a research project is spend a lot of time looking at the values to create the data set you need, seeing what you need to transform, what you need to combine, and what data is currently missing. Within the World Development Indicators, or WDI, dataset, we'll be focusing on variables of corrupt and GDPPC. The first index, corrupt, is perceived corruption within a country's government. Citizens were surveyed and asked questions like, what do you need to plan bribes to start a local business? Note that corruption is reverse coded. So that means higher scores equal lower perceived corruption, and this ranges from 0 to 10. The second variable is gross domestic product per capita, which indicates how well the economy is doing, scaled for the population size of a country. For example, it might not be very interesting to note that Botswana produces less than Brazil overall, but it might be interesting to note that Botswana produces more per citizen than Brazil in 2014. Note that in using these variables from the WDI dataset, we've given over the responsibility of determining what is corruption and what is quality of economy to the World Bank. They've decided this, they've operationalized this, not us. So we've given over that to them. So we're stuck with how they've operationalized it. We might not agree with it, but that's what we got. We've also allowed dynamic concepts to become really simple numbers. However, this allows us to move quickly into the later stages of analysis, which has its own advantages. So let me go ahead and move the Spyder IDE over. Let me go ahead and remove that. That was something I was messing around with before. Um, so I'm using a slightly older version of Python here. It's fine though. Just check in different preferences. Let me move this over there. Tools. Okay, perfect. So, a little bit about Python. So Python is an object-oriented language. So what that means is everything stored in it is an object. It could be a list, it could be a string or a list of strings, like who, what, where, when, how, why. It could be a data set, it could be results, it could be a figure. So an object is whatever you make of it. So it's really important to understand objects. So you just need to understand the different types of objects to really figure out how Python works. So the big thing is Python's completely free. So it's free to download distribution. We can go ahead and use it. It's great. Um, so what we're going to do for this is we'll talk a little bit about the IDE and then talk about modules. So right here we have our script. So this is where we can type in our code. We have on this upper right-hand panel, this is where we have a different value. So we have our variable labels. Well, we can also have our plots, listing of files here. And we can kind of see what we have within our environment or our session. We also have the little console window. So when we print out and run analyses, we can also get the results here. So we'll get an input line and then an output line. So if I type in x equals hello, you go ahead and run that. And then x. So we can see now we have an object that's a string, hello. And if I go ahead and then run line 9, so I can highlight it. I could also just have the cursor on the line and run it. And it's going to go ahead and run that. So let me go ahead and do print x. And now we can see hello. We can also kind of see a history of this as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and open up the syntax and we're going to talk through it. So to open it up, I'm going to go ahead and open up a file. I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to find my PyScript. And I'm going to go ahead and open it. So the first thing to talk about is the different modules. So Python modules, you can have this at the start of your code. So think of it as a series of functions, and when we activate a module, the functions that are built in with that, it allows us to use it within our session. So by also having this at the top, it really helps others who are using your code to know what packages and modules you need to have installed to run it. So for now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the OS, and we're setting the working directory. Let me go ahead and change this to, I'm just going to change the directory here, and intro to Python. That's going to be specific to my working directory. When you do this, you want to change it to yours. That way, Python knows where to find the data set. So then I can go ahead and I will run those. Oh, and it ran everything. Okay. Um, so what we have here is, let me go ahead and clear this out. Okay. So a couple things I want to mention within this one running code. If you run this play button, that's actually running the entire file. So I'm going to go ahead and clear things out. I don't use Spyder too often, so take me a few minutes to kind of reorient myself with this. So what we probably want to do is we have some different options. We can run a file, which we're not going to do. We can run a current cell, and then current cell and go to the next one, and then run selection of current line. So we're going to use this run selection of current line to go through each one. So we're importing OS, and now we're changing our directory. Now we know that Python is going to be set into our intro to Python. We can then go ahead, and if I check the files here, we can see all the files that we have in there. So that looks exactly how we want it set up. We're going to load some additional uh, modules here too. So we're going to go ahead and include things like pandas, which is really great for data structures and data analysis tools. It can take things like CSV files in Excel. We can import the data using pandas. We also have things like NumPy, which is going to be for scientific computing. We have SciPy and Matplotlib, which is going to be good for creating visualizations. So I'm going to go ahead and run those. And something I omitted to mention here is we can see this hashtag or pound symbol. This is going to go ahead and be a comment. So you see how it's grayed out in mine? I like using dark mode. So yours might look a little bit different, but we can see that this is commented out. And when we go to run it, Python knows, hey, it's a comment and nothing's happening. So now we have these loaded in there. I'm going to go ahead and also do some additional statistics functions that we need for descriptive statistics and for OLS, ordinary least squares regression for later. So now we have our environment set up, we have our modules loaded, and now we can actually start creating some different objects. So we'll talk a little bit about the basics. So as I said before, we have everything with a pound symbol is going to be at the start of a comment. This is really helpful if you're first learning, make sure you put lots of annotations in there. Whenever I work on different projects, I always make sure I annotate it heavily. That way, if I open up a couple weeks from then or longer, I have reminders to myself of what I was doing. So I can go ahead and we can assign an object called D, and we're assigning that a value of 4. So I can go ahead, I'm going to select both of those lines, and I'm going to run those. So we have our input, D equals 4, and our output is 4. And here we can see an object called D. It's an integer, because there's no decimal points, and the value of 4. So we can either use D, or we can also put this in the console window, because the console window, it's not going to record it within our syntax. If I do this, print D, well, it's 4. We can also do things like assign a floating number, which has decimal points. And I'm going to go ahead and print that out. So saying the variable or the object name is going to be the same thing as if you say print. So we can also create a list. So if we're creating an object called X, and by using square brackets, we're going to create a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to check by using on X, I'm going to say the length function, and then print that length function. So now it's going to print out, okay, there is 10 for the size, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. From there, we can then use the square brackets next to the object name in that list and print what is a specific item index. So if we do that, we have 3. Well, interestingly, within Python, this doesn't just start at 1 for the index, it starts at position 0. So it's 0, 1, 2. So position 2 is number 3. Position 0, that's going to be the first position index, is going to be a 1. If we do :4, it's going to print everything up to position 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If we do -2, it's going to go backwards. -1, -2, -2 is 9. We can also then do things like we can create a loop that goes through each value in a list, and if the value is 1, it is skipped. If the number is greater than 5, it is skipped. Uh, Notice the indents and the lines. So this lets Python know where to stop. So having these indents is really, really critical. So if it's item 1 is going to be, it's going to continue. Then once we get to greater than 5, it's going to break, or it's going to stop. So let's go ahead and run that. Oh, I keep on doing that. Let me go ahead and just run that. That is one little. Oh, let me go ahead. If item is, let me just fix this and debug some code. There we go. So I just had to fix that. I'll fix that within the code as well later. So the nice thing is when you have stuff like that, it did print it out. It says is with a literal. Do you mean equals equals? So it will give you a warning. It did work. I'm just fixing it so that way just to remove that error for the future, that we don't have to worry about it. So if this is going to continue, but then it's going to go ahead and so it's going to print everything out except for 1. And then if it's greater than 5, it's going to go ahead and stop it. Great. So we can also do what's called a tuple. So a tuple is elements tuples and ordered, and thus it can be accessed by position, but the elements and the positions are locked, so we can't change it. Like if we want to change within a list, we can change the order, we can change things around in it, but it's what's called an immutable list. So we're going to create using parentheses rather than square brackets an immutable list or a tuple. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to ask what is the length of B, and then I'm going to ask for position 2, which is going to be number 3. We can also work with string variables. So we can say, hello, workshop attendees as H, print H, having fun with Python yet? And we can also do the combination of these. So we can go ahead and create an object called H. Hello, workshop attendees. We can go ahead and print it. Having fun with Python yet? And then we can also combine the two. So it's going to print H and I. And we can see it put all of that there together. Great. So next, we'll talk a little bit about a dictionary. So a dictionary is a good way for grouping elements. In this example, each group of elements starts with a group indicator, movie name, and episode number. This makes a dictionary a convenient way to construct a data frame in Python. So we'll start with an empty dictionary called Star Wars. And then what we're going to do is we're saying, okay, Star Wars, The Phantom Menace equals episode 1. I'm going to go ahead and keep on adding all those in there. So now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and double click on Star Wars. So we have our key. Our key is going to be the episode title. And then the value is going to be which episode number. So we can do things like print get. So right now we're saying from the Star Wars object, I'm going to use the get method. And I'm specifically a New Hope, and I'm going to print it out. So when I run that, it's going to print out the corresponding value. So that's episode 4. We can also create a loop within our dictionary for episode in Star Wars, print the episode plus a colon space, and then the episode number. So when we run this, let me go and highlight it. It's going to loop through and have The Phantom Menace episode 1, Attack of the Clones episode 2, Revenge of the Sith episode 3, and so forth. Great, so that's how you create some different objects. We're going to stop video 1 here, and we'll pick up with how to import data and work with the data set in the next video. Thank you, and we'll see you momentarily.